Somewhere in your phone, there's a name you haven't opened in years. You know whose it is. You two used to talk every day. About nothing, mostly. Nothing was the point. You knew their schedule, their handwriting, the exact shape of their laugh before it landed. For a while, they were the entire weather of your life. Then it stopped. Not with a fight. Nobody moved across the world. There wasn't a bad night you could circle on a calendar. One ordinary afternoon was the last time you really spoke, and it walked out dressed like every other afternoon. You've got a few of these. People who were, for a season, everything. Now filed somewhere between "we should catch up" and "gone." Nobody teaches you how to miss someone who's still alive and never actually left, so you don't. You file it under normal and keep driving. There's a reason it happened, and it isn't the one you've spent years quietly blaming yourself for. Start with the strangest part. There's no funeral for this. When someone dies, the world hands you a script. People come over. They bring food you don't eat. They lower their voices and say the name. The loss is marked. You're allowed to come apart, and everyone understands why. When a friend just thins out of your life, nothing. No card, no casserole. Nobody says they're sorry about you and Sam. The thing that mattered stops existing, and the world doesn't so much as blink, so you don't either. You call it growing apart because that's the phrase, and you swallow the whole thing without ever admitting there was anything to swallow. But you kept the receipt. It's why a photo can take your legs out 6 years later. Why one song from one summer is a bruise you forgot you had. Why a face turns up while you're doing the dishes, uninvited, and won't leave. The grief didn't go anywhere. It just never got a name, so it never got permission to exist. And here's the first thing to get straight, because you've probably had it backwards for years. It wasn't your fault. You're not bad at people. They didn't secretly stop caring. What happened to you was closer to weather than to failure. And once you see the machinery, you can't unsee it. Because it comes for every kind of friend you've got, on its own schedule. The friends from when you were small. The ones who knew your house, your mother's cooking, the street you grew up on. Most of them went first. And you can't even remember the goodbye because there wasn't one. There was a move, a new school, a summer that ended, and one day they were just the name your parents ask about. Then the school friends. The ones you'd have died for at 15, who you were sure were permanent. Because permanent is the only thing you can imagine when you're 15. Graduation scattered them across cities you've never visited. Then the college ones. The deepest of all, maybe. The ones who watched you become whoever you are now. Pulled apart one job offer at a time. And then the work friends, who felt like the real thing right up until one of you left the company. And you found out, quietly and a little sadly, that the thing holding you together was mostly the building. Every era of your life came with people you were certain you'd keep. You kept almost none of them. And it wasn't for lack of love. It was for lack of the one thing nobody tells you a friendship actually runs on. A researcher named Jeffrey Hall wanted to put a number on it. Not a feeling, a number. How many hours does it actually take to make a friend? So he counted. Around 50 hours together to turn a stranger into a casual friend. 90 before you become actual friends. And more than 200 hours before your brain quietly moves someone into the room marked close. 200 hours. Sit in that for a second. And it's not 200 hours of sitting near each other looking at your phones. It's 200 hours of being bored in the same room. Of talking about nothing that matters, which, it turns out, is exactly how you find out what does. And here's the detail that quietly explains your entire adult life. Time spent working next to someone barely counts. So, where did you ever get 200 useless hours with anybody? It has to be useless time. Time with no purpose but the other person. You didn't earn them. You were handed them. For free. The same desk for a year. The same bus. The bedroom across the hall. The walk home that took the long way because neither of you wanted the day to end. The best conversations of your life probably happened over nothing at all. A parking lot at midnight, a 3-hour phone call as teenagers with the TV mumbling in the background, waiting together for a bus that was never coming. That's what 200 hours are actually made of. And that's exactly the kind of time adulthood has no room left for. That was the machine. Repeated, unplanned, pointless closeness. It built nearly everyone you've ever loved. And nobody warns you what happens the day it gets switched off. It gets switched off on schedule, right around the time everyone congratulates you for your life finally starting. You graduate, and the building that gathered you all in one place every day simply isn't there anymore. One of you takes a job 3 states over. One moves in with somebody, and their evenings quietly rearrange around a new person. One has a kid, and their free hours don't shrink. They vanish. Overnight, all of them at once. And for the first time in your life, keeping a friend asks something of you it never asked before. Work. The scheduled kind. The kind you have to actively defend against everything else screaming for the same slot. No more free hours. Now, everyone has to be proposed, booked 3 weeks out, moved twice, and crammed into a Tuesday when you're already running on empty. The relationship psychologist Marisa Franco says it as flatly as it can be said. Adult friendships die because we quietly stop doing the one thing that ever made them. Showing up unplanned over and over. We start saving our friends for when things calm down. And things never calm down. There's no year coming that hands the free hours back, so the hours stop adding up. And here's the part with teeth. Closeness doesn't sit still. Robin Dunbar spent a whole career on this and found that friendship behaves like anything you stop using. It wastes. The close friend you stop seeing doesn't wait for you frozen exactly as you left them. They slide outward, one ring at a time. The 3 a.m. person becomes a good friend, becomes someone you used to know, becomes a name your thumb scrolls past. And the cruelest math is right at the top. The friendships that took the most hours to build are the ones that need the most to maintain. Close costs upkeep. So when the free time disappears, it isn't the shallow ones that go first. It's the deep ones, the expensive ones. Quietly running on fumes. Because you both assume something that good could never run out. It can. It's running out right now, in the background, while you're busy being an adult. And there's a ceiling on all of it that nobody mentions. You don't have room for everyone. Dunbar's number. About 150 people you can genuinely keep at once. And inside that, the close seats are almost nothing. Room for maybe 5 people you'd truly fall apart in front of. 15. You'd call from the worst night of your life. These don't appear to be choices you can just override with willpower. They look like limits built into the size of the thing behind your eyes. So your life runs a quiet arithmetic you never agreed to. Every single time someone new arrives, a partner, a whole office of coworkers, a friend who becomes family, and above all, a child. Somebody already inside has to slide to the back to make the room. Not because you love the old one any less, because the front row has exactly as many seats as it has, and not one more. That's why the friend fades at the precise moment your life fills up. The filling is the fading. Same event, 2 names. You didn't drop anyone, you just ran out of front row. And the longer a friendship sits in silence, the harder it gets to break that silence. Not easier. Every month you don't reach out, the reaching out feels bigger, heavier. More like it needs an explanation. A week is a text. A year is a whole speech you don't know how to write. So you keep not writing it. And the gap does the only thing gaps do. It widens. And it's on a timetable you could nearly set a clock to. For most people, the number of friends peaks around the age of 25. And then, for the entire rest of your life, that line only points one direction. Down, slowly, to everyone at once. So quietly that every single person is convinced it's happening only to them. It's happening on a large enough scale now that researchers gave it a name. The friendship recession. Across the developed world, the share of people who say they have any close friends has been falling for decades. And this isn't a soft, emotional problem you can shrug off. Loneliness turns out to wear on the human body about as hard as smoking. One landmark analysis put chronic social isolation on par with 15 cigarettes a day. A genuine predictor of how long you'll live. The longest study Harvard has ever run, tracking people for over 80 years, landed on one finding louder than all the rest. The single best predictor of a long, healthy, happy life isn't money or success or fame. It's the strength of your close relationships. The people you're quietly letting drift are, according to the data, the actual thing keeping you alive. And it hits some harder than others. Surveys suggest men have taken the worst of it. The share of men who say they have no close friends at all has multiplied several times over in a single generation. A lot of men wake up somewhere in their 40s and realize the last time they made a real friend without trying was in a classroom or on a team 20 years ago, and that every friendship since has slowly, silently thinned to a name in a group chat. So if you're past 25 and your evenings have gone quiet and you've caught yourself wondering, What's wrong with you? The honest answer is nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. You're just old enough now to have started reading the graph and notice how it actually happened to you, because a very specific kind of ache lives right there. We're raised on endings that make sense. The blow-up, the betrayal, the slammed door. A clean, awful, nameable moment you can point at and say, there, that's where it broke. Almost none of yours broke like that. There was no scene, no villain, no moment at all. It didn't end. It thinned. The replies got slower. We should catch up got said just often enough to slowly become a headstone. And that's worse, in a way you don't see coming. A fight, at least, hands you a reason. Something to be angry at. A story with edges you can hold. A fade hands you nothing. Nobody wronged you. You wronged nobody. There's no argument to win and no apology to make. Just two people slowly not doing anything until the whole thing is gone, and neither of them can tell you when. The goodbyes that wreck you are the ones that never got to be goodbyes. So that's the how. Hours, room, decay, the slow thinning. And if that were the whole story, it would just be a sad fact you could close a browser tab on and forget. But it isn't the whole story. Here's the part the numbers can't touch. A psychologist named Pauline Boss spent her life on one very particular kind of grief. Not the grief of someone dying, the grief of someone who is gone while they are still completely alive. She called it ambiguous loss. A loss with no ending, no body, nothing to bury, so the mind never gets to close the file on it. And a faded friendship is precisely that. The person isn't dead. They're right there. You could see their face this second if you opened the app. They're getting older in real time. 3 miles away or an ocean. Inside an entire life you now know nothing about. New job, new heartbreak. New people sitting in the seats that used to be yours. Present and completely out of reach at the very same time. That's why it never scars over the way other losses do. A death, however unbearable, is at least finished. You can grieve towards something solid. But this just stays open. For years. Something left ajar in a house you moved out of a long time ago that you somehow keep walking past. And there was never a funeral. Nobody ever sat down beside you and said the only sentence that would have actually helped. That you lost something real, and it is okay to be sad about it. So you carried it alone and told yourself the whole time that it didn't count. It counted. It always counted.